And what I want to do now is link that in with the copy of the guidelines. I hope I copy there.
Yes, these are
the Australian Association for Infant Mental Health.
Yes,
and that, right?
yes, and that's based on what Jennifer McIntosh's contribution on.
Well, let's have a little look, because for the benefit of those at home, it's called Infants and Overnight Care, Post-Separation and Divorce Guidelines for Protecting the Very Young Child's Sense of Comfort and Security. You've got that, have you, Bill?
Yes, I do.
In front of you?
Yes.
Number 1, it says, if parental separation occurs before birth or in the first years of a child's life, special consideration is needed to ensure the continuity of a healthy primary attachment. Well, if I was a father and I saw those guidelines and that first principle, I would be a bit worried. I'd be intimidated by that. But hang on a minute. Rutter has said children are not damaged by separation.
Yes.
Oh, crikey. So that one really, it doesn't really apply. That's wrong.
Yes,
So
it's just straight out wrong, isn't it?
Let's go to number 2, because number 2 can't be wrong. As this may be a very difficult time for all concerned, separated parents may need extra help to understand that frequent fixed overnight shared time parenting schedules during the first years, while well-intentioned, and this is quite serious, may severely disrupt important developmental gains for their young child. Well, that sounds pretty serious. I wouldn't want to go through shared parenting or overnight care if it was going to disrupt important developmental gains. But hang on, once again, that was what Bowlby said. Bowlby said my son would be intellectually impaired, that he would be over-aggressive, that he would be depressed. Bowlby said dwarfism and affectionate psychopathy. But Rutter's work showed that children do not suffer as a result of separation. So these are just excuses to stop me having my shared parenting, aren't they? I don't know. Let's go on to number 3. That must be right, number 3. Under the age of 2 years, overnight separations from the primary parent create unique stresses for the infant. Well, all stresses are unique, aren't they, Bill?
That's right.
In the majority of circumstances, it goes on, non-essential overnight separations during these critical months of development are not advisable. Well, there you go. That's straight up. There can't be anything wrong with that. But there we go. Hang on a minute. Rutter said there's no such thing as critical months. You'll hear that social workers and family court welfare officers talk about critical periods and windows of opportunity. But Rutter said that all experiences at all ages of children are important. He got into hot water because he said Sure Start programs that focus on the first couple of years aren't necessarily the best thing, because children, what happens if a child gets ill at the age of 4? And what he focused on was the fact that some experiences at all ages are important to children. So those first 3 things on the guidelines are basically not right.
I just in 3, as you quoted before, I like the non-essential. I think you'd suddenly find that everything is non-essential when there's a question of an overnight separation. And
then, so that's the first part of these guidelines. And then if I ask you to turn over to 4.2, then we go into furthermore, for the listeners at home, we're going over the next page, and 4.2 it says, furthermore, the young child's parents should be able to have civil conversations together with the child. And it goes on about how the relationships between parents necessarily have to be equitable. But again, what they're doing here is they're referring to the earlier Rutter research. This cites back to the Rutter research, which said discord was bad for children. And as Rutter showed, it's high conflict that is bad for children. And what they're doing, what these guidelines are doing, is by association, they're trying to correlate the problems with discord or conflict with the idea of psychology being, shared parenting being, or overnight stays being necessarily bad for children. By associating those 2 different paradigms, what they're trying to do is discredit the theory of shared parenting and overnight stays. If so what she's tried to do, what they've tried to do there is link 2 things that are shouldn't be linked. Correlate the what Rutter has shown the discord aspect of it, which is wrong for children, especially high conflict. And she's tried to link that with the idea of there being some sort of psychological, these bulby elements, but they shouldn't really be together. Conflict is one thing that should be dealt with the courts. Shared parenting and overnight stays is another thing. There's nothing wrong with overnight stays or, in principle, or contact with the other parent. But has shown that in his work. And but the only reason that conflict might be a problem is that if they're high conflict families. And what she's tried to do is, by association, by pushing these things together, suggesting a correlation, which there isn't one. Another technique, if I may say, that she's used is something called bootstrapping. Bootstrapping is a thing that you find in American law when they try and convict someone on a very serious offence and haven't got enough evidence. What they do is they search around for a lesser offence and then they stick that with it. And that's called bootstrapping.
I think that's how they got Al Capone into jail, isn't it? With the tax offence.
Tax offence. That's one. That's an example. Well, in this case, what McIntosh does is she says, to make the guidelines seem objective and impartial, she says the primary caregiver can be male or female, okay? So therefore it's objective. But then what she says, she adopts this principle of monotropy, which is from Bowlby's work, to say, yes, to make it appear objective and impartial. But then she goes on to say, but you can only have one primary caregiver, and that's the bootstrapping, the original. And if you get a jury of 6 men and 6 women, and you say, look, you can either choose the man or the woman, so this is not gender bias, and then say to them, but when the baby comes along, you can only pick one of them, the monotropy aspect, and 9 times out of 10 they're going to pick the woman. So by bootstrapping the idea of monotropy to the idea of primary caregiver, she's really trying to push through her own ideas about child development. If we go on to I think you've also got there the clinical and research perspectives. So the people at home, hopefully they're still listening. Infants in overnight care, there's a sheet that she's prepared which gives her justification for these guidelines. And if I refer you to the last sentence in the first paragraph, Bill, yes. It says the paper briefly outlines new evidence in this area and considers implications for the management of post-separation parenting plans for very young children. Okay? So that's the basis of these papers, the justification. Jennifer McIntosh, and her name's put to this paper. But if we turn over, she quotes from two extracts from an edition from the Family Court Journal, which she was the special editor for. So she edited a special edition of a journal, a pretty academic journal called Family Law Review, and she's quoted, can you see on the second page the 2 quotes?
Yes.
And the first one she's quoted from Shaw, okay? And this paper, the special edition, was on attachment, and all the people that contributed the paper came from a Bowlby tradition. She's quite open about it, and you can go online and check this all, the Family Court Review, and put in the search words Bowlby and McIntosh, and it'll come up with the paper, and you can read these for yourself.